Hey everybody, Alicia here with the Self-Awareness Podcast where we share mental health journeys from all different types of backgrounds. Thank you so much for being here. Today we're interviewing Vanessa Cutting. Vanessa is a multi-talented person. She describes herself as a jack of all trades, which I agree. She's a proud mother, an influential fitness instructor, but most importantly, she is a SCAD's heart attack advocate. Today, we're going to talk about how she used the power of movement to overcome challenges throughout her life. I can't wait to share her inspirational story, so let's go ahead and get right into the show. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Self-Awareness Podcast. Today we have our guest Vanessa, and we're so excited to hear her story and hear about her journey. So let's go ahead and get into the story. Vanessa, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, I am a social media influencer and UGC content creator. I was in the fitness industry for 17 years, and then I had a life-altering event that just kind of made me go like, "Oh, what am I doing with my life?" And it made me just really kind of have to really focus on pulling back and finding out like what was most important in my life. I think since I was a young girl, I grew up a military brat, right? So I traveled a lot and moved from town to town. I never felt truly like there was that place of home or that place of like, right? Because there was just so much travel, so much going on in my life always. And it kind of just that filtered into my adult life. And I just kind of kept going with that. And I just had tons and tons of ups and downs and stresses and things like that that I just realized after my life altering event, which was a SCAD heart attack at the age of 38. I realized I needed to kind of pull back and kind of find my own sense of home. Like what was home to me? What made me feel good? And that kind of brought me into this whole like, well, I love doing social media. I love being on there, but what I love the most is telling people like how I've kind of overcome my journey. And one of them is movement. Movement is medicine to me. And that's kind of like what led me into the fitness world. I know I'm kind of jumping all over, but that's kind of what led me into the fitness world was finding that sense of home and what made me feel good. But then I realized I was doing it for everyone else and I wasn't doing it for myself. And so it kind of made me in 2020 have to go, okay, instead of doing it for others and teaching classes and constantly being on the go, how can I pull back and just do it for me? And now that's where I share my journey a lot on social media. I do a lot of, other things too as well, but it's mostly about how I've recovered and what I've done and what are the steps I've done, especially because the type of heart attack I had, they tell us that we're not really ever supposed to lift weights again, work out again. And I'm like, that's just not, that's not, that's not going to be me. I know myself and I know my journey, and movement is healing and movement is medicine to me. And there's one thing I tell my kids all the time, which is if you move a muscle, you move a thought. So sometimes when we're in our negative self story, if I can pull back and go just for a simple walk, if I can go back and, go do some yoga or Pilates or weightlifting, I usually will always feel better. So
Mhm.
it's kind of where I've led my journey has gone, and it's brought me here now. And now I'm 3 years later, and I share my journey on social media of all my fitness tips and tricks that I do, and I share outfits and make them stuff like that because that's my hobby. But I feel like my true journey now in life is to show women that we can have a life altering event and then we can grow through it, but movement will truly heal us if we keep moving forward.
Oh, I love that. And thank you so much for sharing. And I can definitely connect with the movement being part of a healing journey and internalizing it to find a way so it works for ourselves instead of, like you were saying, maybe doing it because of social standards or anything along those lines. So thank you so much for sharing that. And I'm so excited to go into detail about your journey and everything that you've experienced throughout of every event. And one of the first questions that I want to get into is about your childhood. I know you said that uh, you had a military family, so you were moving a lot. I can relate being in the military, but not as a child. So can you go a little bit more into detail of like what that was like moving at a young age and kind of like how you felt emotionally, if you can remember any of those thoughts?
Yeah, so a lot of it, there was many a times where we would move, right, as a kid, and it would be like, oh, it's fun and exciting. But then you'd get there and you'd be like, wait, I'm the new kid again. I don't know anybody again. I've got to
Mhm.
make friends. The nice part was some of my childhood I was on base, so I could make friends easier that way because those kids were always transitioning as well. But then my parents decided, by the time I think it was 8 years old, that they were no longer going to do base housing. We were always going to live off base. So
Yeah.
that became even harder because it was like, okay, you get into a house, you get into a routine, and then it'd be like, oh, nope, we're moving again. And so for me, I struggled to, I felt like I never found my people and I never found that like sense of home, that sense of comfort. Granted, I didn't grow up in the greatest of loving households, so I think that didn't help matters either. So I actually suffered with depression and anxiety from probably the time I was 7, 8 years old and up through high school. So much so that, when my parents, again, my senior year of high school, they're like, we're moving. I was like, okay, let's go. Like, I'm going to be the new kid again. I'm going to figure this out. But I also knew that I struggled a lot with trying to fit in, make friends, and kind of find my way because it was always constantly changing, right? As soon as I'd find something or find a sports team or something like that, it would change again. So I think that was challenging as far as growing up in the military household. It's cool, and I've got to do a lot of really fun things. I got to travel the world. By the time I was 6 years old, I'd already seen like 8 countries. Um,
Wow.
I got to do Mac Air flights where you fly with the cargo and all the red pull down nets. So I did some of those really cool things. But, as far as stability wise, I think that was it. It probably would have been better if the household would have been better, right? And I think there's some military families that can totally do this. And as long as their core unit is good, the kids will thrive. But I think because our core unit wasn't the best, we didn't thrive. Me and my sisters, we all three of us struggled mentally um, throughout our teenage years and into our 20s, 30s, and 40s. So,
Yeah, as that is something that I can definitely relate to as far as, um, having that depression during that time of being a teenager. And it kind of sounds like with all the moving, you had maybe a lack of control as far as what was going to go on. And you just kind of, grew immune to, this is happening again because it happens so often. So thank you so much for being able to break that down and give us a perspective of what it was like physically and emotionally. And just to ask about that core unit that you were talking about, being able to travel a lot, but not maybe being able to express like where everybody was on the page every move. So my question is, did you and your sisters or maybe your parents ever talk about mental health, or when did you kind of start identifying feelings and emotions and how it related to your body or emotions?
probably around the age of 7. My uncle committed suicide, and I think that is kind of where we started to have discussions. They weren't the greatest of discussions because I didn't realize how much mental illness was in my family until my parents got divorced years and years later. So I think it was a mixture of um, seeing it firsthand, seeing it within the family, asking the questions, trying to figure it out, but kind of not really being discussed. It wasn't until I was in, because I remember, I'll go back. I remember around 7 years old, my mom really struggling with her brother's death, and it just kind of changed her. And I remember it changing my grandmother, and they were completely different people than what I remembered prior to that. And then by the time I got to high school and I was struggling with my depression so bad, I went to see a therapist. And I remember having these discussions and talking to her, and she was the first one who was like, it's okay. Like, it's okay to not be okay. It's okay to know that this is in your family, know that this is something you might struggle with, know that this is something that needs to be discussed, even though my mom didn't want us to just discuss it with me. She wanted to keep it more of like a sweep it on the rug, let's just keep going. Um, and she'll just, pile along and just keep going, like plow along. And I just remember at 16 was when I kind of had my first like, oh, this is what mental illness is. This is something that I need to work on. This is something I need to have discussions about, and something I needed to kind of figure out in my own life. But so seven's when I saw it, 16's when I started to get help for it.
Wow. First of all, I want to say I'm so sorry for your loss and, how it affected your family and being able to physically and visually see the change amongst your immediate family that the passing took. So, again, I just want to say my condolences and thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for being able to go into detail as far as what you saw and felt at that young age. And it
Yeah.
kind of relates back to what you were saying in the beginning of when you started the moving or just identifying, 7 or 8 is when you understood that you were having these types of emotions, but, it wasn't until something happened amongst your family where you felt like, or maybe were presented a way to discuss mental illness. So it kind of was identified in a way, but wasn't identified to you until you were 16 years old and able to get therapy and understand and have that validation that your feelings are valid and your emotions are valid through everything you've been through and experienced and felt. So, thank you so much for sharing that. And I also want to ask, what was the process of going to therapy? You have an example? Was there a point where you wanted to get help as far as therapy, or what did that look like for you?
So to be completely honest, it kind of just happened out of nowhere. My mom was actually going back to college, to get her degree to become a teacher. And so she went to a class and the guy was discussing class and what he had gone through with his journey. And he just started describing what ADD was. And so she was like, I think this is what Ness has. So long story short, she came home, she started talking to me, and she's like, "Do you have this? Does this happen when the teacher talks? Does this happen?" And I was like, "Yeah, all these things." Like, because I was a pretty bright kid, but I struggled school wise. And so we couldn't figure it out, right? And you have to remember, I'm in my 40s now. So this was quite a while ago. And so she took me to see a therapist and was like, let's do testing to see if you have ADD. And then that's when we started doing, I actually did EMDR way back then, because I think this is about almost 20 years ago. And that's when we came out with a lot of the depression, a lot of things that had happened in my childhood that I've been kind of bearing, and then realizing that I did have ADD on top of it. So it was like a mix of this whole kind of like just happened by coincidence that I went for this, to have ADD testing, and then found out more about my family and more about mental health and taking care of my mental health. Um, I did therapy from then on, probably until I was 18 or 19. And then, of course, it's like you go to a doctor, you go to one doctor, you love them, then something happens. Again, we had to move. So when we moved, I went to a new doctor, didn't love them, they wanted it's a horrific story, but went into the office, told her my life story, told her what happened. She went out into the lobby and started telling all the girls that work there what happened. And so I was like, okay, I'm never going back to therapy again. Like, this is awful. Um, but I knew therapy was good. It was healing, and I knew she was just not the right one for me. It took me years to finally go back, but then when I was in my 20s, I started going back. And I've gone back and forth off and on now since I was 16. I think it is healing in a lot of ways. I think you can have moments of understanding, moments of having that self-reflection. And that someone can kind of draw that out of you. And it's also a safe space a lot of times too, I find, for people. I mean, I've even taken my kids, I've taken my husband, we've done, marriage counseling, everything, because I just find that it is good sometimes just to have a sounding board, even if they're just listening. Like, it's just someone
Mhm.
there so you can blurt it out. But I do find that it has been healing over the years for me.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Thank you for sharing that example. And I'm so sorry that specific individual broke that trust in along the lines of, exposing everything that you've been through others, breaking that trust. And, breaking the trust made you lose faith in that person, but also congratulations to you for having the acknowledgement that that was based on the person and their actions and not the system in itself. So I think you being able to have that, baseline and understanding for yourself of what it did for you, I think that says a lot about the reflection and work that you did for yourself as far as taking what works for you and being able to utilize that in what ways that work best for you. So, and I know how you said that the way that you stumbled into therapy was, kind of a coincidence, kind of out of nowhere. But I love that story, by the way. And one thing that we talk about a lot in the podcast is the type of education. Education is the first step when it comes to mental health because, there are actually 53 minimum types of emotions. And if you don't even recognize those, then it kind of just starts there and is a validating feeling as far as the more you know. And I'm sure that's when your mom heard about the instructor talking about these symptoms. That was the click for her, but also being able to put you through that process and identify so many things. But again, I want to, validate you and put the congratulations on you because, there was still a point where you could have not gone through with it or taken it seriously, and you did. So I just want to say I'm so proud of you for, being so straightforward and what it sounds like you took it very seriously as far as your education and figuring out what coping mechanisms work for you and being vulnerable such at such a young age. So congratulations, thank you for sharing what that experience was like for you at a young age and also being able to feel comfortable and having that acknowledge of how beneficial this system works for you and go back at an age in your 20s. So, another question that we like to go kind of based off of that is maybe you're learning many coping mechanisms during this time when you started therapy and when you went back again. What kind of coping mechanisms did you learn early on, and what mechanisms did you kind of build on in order to progress your mental health journey?
So I'd have to say, in by nature, I am a problem solver. I'm constantly researching and finding ways to solve problems. It's just who I am. Um, I would have to say the one thing my mom would always push me on is to talk to someone. So I felt like that's something that she taught me. From there, it was a lot of self-soothing, a lot of figuring out on my own. Like I said, the inside house was not, it was a lot of turmoil, a lot of issues. And then I also have two, my sisters are much older than I am. They're 7 and 8 years older than I am. So there was a lot of like, you're the baby, like just go deal with your emotions and feelings on your own. But in the same breath, knowing that the way I was doing it wasn't healthy. So I think from the time I pretty much was 16, 17, going to therapy, it was figuring out ways to make myself better and how. I think one of the biggest things that helped me a lot was the EMDR when I was 16, to kind of figure out where was I storing emotions. And then I'd have to say the biggest thing was me getting into fitness. Fitness was, I just realized how different I was when I was working out versus when I wasn't working out. And then over the years, I would have to say I still struggled. I struggled a ton. I was ups and downs. I was different, going to different therapists. They were diagnosing me with all these different things, but I just kept feeling like none of them were me at the time. And I just knew like I kept having to find things that made me feel good, but the one thing that always made me feel good was working out or going for a walk or just moving my body. And I struggled with addiction and things like that over the years. And the biggest thing I took away from NA was move a muscle, move a thought. And so after that, I decided, okay, I've just got to move my body. I just know moving my body will be the best thing for me. So from there, I got married. I had my daughter and I started working at a gym because my mother-in-law did, and she used to be able to take my niece with her. And she always said to me, Vanessa, it's like the perfect job. You can take your daughter with you, you'll get a free membership, and you can still like have your kid there and whatever and get paid. And I was like, oh, this sounds amazing. Okay, I'm gonna go do this. So I started working at a gym. My husband and I had just moved to Baltimore. And I was working at a gym there, and my gym director came up to me and said, you should take a spin class. And I knew I was struggling at that point again. I was back on antidepressants and I was like feeling really depressed, right? I had just had a baby. It's winter and I'm a Floridian. So winter up north is really hard on me. So we're in Baltimore, it's winter time. And I'm just like, I am struggling. And she's like, take a spin class. Well, I took that spin class. I loved it so much. I took a spin class every single day for 3 months straight until I got certified to teach spin. And I was like, okay,
Wow.
this is my thing. This is what makes me feel good. Because every time I left a spin class, I was like, I feel amazing. Like I love how I made this makes me feel. This is giving me the endorphins. My body's changing. I'm feeling good. I'm showing up as a mom. I'm showing up as a wife. And then as the years progressed, I just kept getting I have 18 certifications. So I just kept getting certifications because I was like, I love doing this. I just love movement and I love the way it makes me feel. And even now to the point that if I get upset, like the other day, I got upset with my kids and I'm like, that's it. I'm going out, I'm going for a walk. And I went and walked my neighborhood. I came back and I'm instantly like, okay, clear headed, feeling better. So I think the biggest thing that I've taken away since I was 16 to now is that I've always come back to movement. Yes, I do things like meditation. Yes, I have lots of self reflections, journaling, things like that. But what always makes me feel better instantly is movement. Even if it's just walking, even if it's just stretching. Sometimes it is. Sometimes I just need to sit on the floor and stretch, and that would make me feel better. Because I just know now, going back, like I have 18 certifications, like I told you, I've gone through a lot of trainings teaching me about trauma, teaching me about how we store it in the body and where we store
Mhm.
it. So sometimes I know, like, if I'm feeling tense, like there's days even now where I'm like, okay, if I'm feeling tense and I just know it, but I can't figure out why, I'll go stretch my hips because I'm like, I know we store so much emotion in our hips. So I
Yeah.
start going through that. And then all of a sudden I'll be like, oh, okay, I start thinking about things. I'm like, this is why I was upset today. This is what was bothering me. But it's that having that self reflection, but the only way for me to get the self reflection is to go move my body. So, in all, movement it has been my biggest thing. That definitely is my tips, tricks, soothing, everything that heals me, makes me feel good.
Hey everybody, Alicia here, and I wanted to come on here and talk about our latest hoodie drop, which is our Confident and Coping hoodie collection. So, we've asked people in our mental health community to submit coping mechanisms that have best worked for them, and we actually put them all together and made it into one design. Not only are these sweaters comfy, they're heavy, they're fitted, they're also made from organic materials. But the best part about this design is that not only the person that's going to be wearing this design is going to benefit from having these coping mechanisms, somebody reading this design behind you could actually be impacted through this design. So I want to come on here and thank everybody for who submitted a design. I'm so thankful. You truly are making a huge impact in the mental health community. And if you're interested in buying a Confident and Coping hoodie, they are available in this off-white color I'm wearing right now, as you see in the video, or military green. They're available on our website, and we're dropping this December 1st. I'm so excited for this drop. Thank you, everybody who's participating in making a mental health difference. I appreciate you so much, and we're impacting so many lives. So with that, let's go ahead and get back into the show. I love how you just put that into such a perspective of where we can visually see how this movement is moving through your body and through your mind. So
Hmm.
you giving us examples to even, put ourselves in that shoes and see, okay, like your example, if I feel upset, I know to like the way that your subconscious thought is I'm going to go for a walk, but you're also doing a coping mechanisms of walking away from situations so you can evaluate, you know, acknowledge your emotion and kind of readjust in order to calm down. And the way you said it and expressed it is that in order to do so, you have to, love that, and it just goes as far as into that type of um, flow that you have in order to start controlling those thoughts that can, gentrement people, including myself. I've struggled with it, overthinking and saying things that I don't mean, but I think that's so powerful, being able to have this idea of I know it works for me, and I'm gonna fill into that. And obviously you did, put that full speed when you went certification after the other one. So I love the story that you said about the spin class. I think that, well, first of all, the gym and bringing your daughter, and it's like, okay, cool. Like throughout your story already, I already see you being presented with certain opportunities and saying yes to it and embracing it. And then we can see as an audience and as listeners that this method that you said of saying yes and going full force and being able to embrace what comes your way has been really helpful no matter if you're in a season, whether if it's a good season or bad season emotionally, being able to take a chance and kind of embrace what's coming your way is obviously has been beneficial as far as your fitness and mental health journey. So thank you so much for sharing that. And there's so many things that I love as far as, well, that actually come to mind about your journey, especially when it comes to being a coach and being able to love some type of love movement into a way of being able to train and show others. Can we talk a little bit more about the community? Because I feel like, we only met online and on Instagram and on the call now, but from what I've heard so far, I feel like you are such a strong support system for the people around you, which is really important when it comes to mental health too, because our journey and our goal for this podcast is to find people that we feel like we can relate to their stories and progress our or start our mental health journey as well. So when it comes to your community, what are kind of things that maybe people ask you or online or in person when it comes to starting their physical or mental health journey? What kind of things do they ask and what do you respond with?
So in person, definitely, because I still sub at a Pilates studio
Hmm.
here and there. And the biggest thing is always, oh my gosh, we miss your classes because you connect the mind and body, right?
Oh.
Because I do a lot of things where before we even are allowed to start our practice, which is one of the things I love that yoga and Pilates, we call it a practice. We don't call it a workout because you are practicing, right? So I
Hmm.
even call my workouts practice because I'm truly practicing to be better. I'm always trying to be 1% better every day. And so one of the things I do before we even start a class, we have to set an intention. What is it you want to gain from today? What is it you showed up for a reason, right? And let's give ourselves that 15 minutes of being completely present and showing that we came here for the reason, and let's embrace that the reason that we're here, and you'll watch how much you'll grow through that. Then from there, we go through the workout, whatever, and I am constantly talking to you about your body. What we carry our life stressors in our everyday stressors in our neck and shoulders. Can we relax those? Can we open up, right? So people come to me after class and they're always like, how do I do that on my own? And like I tell everyone, the biggest thing is breathing. I think breathing is one of the most underrated calming mechanisms we can do. Yes, movement is so great, but sometimes just taking a 4-second breath will seriously calm your mind and calm your attitude, and like you'll just be able to come back to center. And what's one of the things when people are leaving class before they're allowed to leave, I always make them take a couple of deep breaths. And I'm like, now, when you leave here and someone cuts you off in the parking lot, come back to this breath that you just took right now, because you can't calm yourself. It's just a matter of you just leave and you get anxious because you think about all the things that are coming at you. But if you really just kind of slow your breathing down, how much can be presented. And sometimes universe, God, angels, whatever you want to call it, will give you things into your lap if you just slow down and breathe. And I tell people all the time, like, so literally, like, I have a tendency to just take really long, slow breaths throughout the day. And then I just say a positive affirmation to me. And that's even when I get asked online is, how are you so positive after having a heart attack? I mean, you're the fitness of health. You were, at the time I was a vegetarian. I, was teaching constantly. I was, 38 years old, and yet I had a heart attack, right? And my heart attack was due from stress. And so like I tell them, like, I can come back to this place of realizing that that was teaching me. I was letting stress and everything else kind of overtake my life and not realizing that how precious life was, and that I needed to slow down. And so since then, now I'm breathing slower. I'm making myself more aware. I do a lot of positive thinking. So like I tell everybody, I was like, literally, I drive around and I'm just like, "Hi, my name is Vanessa's cutting, and only good things happen to me." And I said, and literally, I will pull into a parking lot and I get the first space, or someone will offer to buy my coffee for me or tea for me. I'm not a coffee drinker; I'm a tea drinker. They'll buy my tea for me. I said, or I'll just get a nice random text from my kids that'll be like, "Mama, this happened and I was thinking of you and I just love you." And I'm like,
Mm,
okay. And I'm like, but I just paused. I'm trying to stay as positive as possible. And I think that's my biggest message is like, you can look at things multiple different ways. So, for instance, I gave an example on social media the other day. My husband started a new job, right? And my daughter's 17 now. So, we gave her one of our cars. And so, my husband's now living across the state, right? So, he's just not living at home with me right now. He's only home on the weekends. So, for right now, until we kind of figure out like what's the new job, what's the income, all those kind of things, let's not rush into buying a car. So take my car. If I have to, I can commute with my daughter and we'll figure it out. So I've been having to walk to the grocery store or walk to the mailbox or whatever. And so I was saying on my social media, I could be upset about this and be like, oh, I have to drive. I mean, I have to walk there. It's so hot, right? Because it's 95 degrees in Florida right now. And I was like, or I could just be like, hey, I'm grateful. I have two working legs. I have a working body. I can move. I can go. I don't have to um, like be upset about this. I could just
yeah.
realize like I'm capable of doing these things. And in the same breath, I get to enjoy nature. I get my steps in. I did movement. I feel good. Or I could be upset that I have to walk. I'm going to go with the latter of it and be like, I'm
Yeah.
excited. I got to walk today. My body's amazing and I'm here. Like, so I think in a roundabout way of coming back to what you asked is I'm always getting asked how I'm staying positive and how do I come back to making myself feel positive. And it's not
Mhm.
making myself, it's just slowing my breathing and realizing I get to choose my thoughts. And the more I choose the positive thoughts, the more good things happen and the more I feel better because we get to choose every day. My husband has this saying, I didn't wake up to do a shitty job, right? I didn't wake up to be a bad person. People don't choose that. They do choose it meant subconsciously. If you can, like, I could be upset right now from the time that I've had a heart attack in my body, like I could feel like it failed me, but in the same breath I'm like, no, it was talking to me. I was just ignoring it. And so now I'm realizing I got to slow down, breathe, and I can notice the signs, and I can notice that my body's talking to me and it's time for me to listen. And I can choose to see it as a bad thing or I can choose to see it as a good thing, and I'd rather see the good.
Uh, this is so powerful. Thank you, Vanessa, for being able to share all this connection that, you've witnessed throughout your life and experienced and had that self-awareness and reflection on in order to help others with, giving them the tools in order to stay positive. And, hearing what you just said along with what you said earlier, as far as you've always been a problem solver, I see the connection here. And I love that because this is such an important tool in order or habit to build in a mental health journey, because sometimes if we feel as if we don't have the tools or the way to strategize how to problem solve, that's where people maybe feel upset or feel like they lose confidence and don't feel confident in being able to accomplish small things or large things. So you've been able to express or to give an example on multiple examples on how you use the problem solving, but also you put it in a light of showing positivity. So I love that example. And, you being able to share the vehicle and show the gratitude and focus on the gratitude of being able to have the capability of walking and being in nature and everything along those lines. I think that's very powerful and something I can relate to as well, especially if I'm doing a new workout or a workout that's maybe not my favorite. But like when I think, running, I'm like, I'm so thankful that, I have these legs in order to go on this run because not everybody has that ability. And, I want to do it for myself, but also, take the gratitude and be thankful in order to, put this body into movement where what it can do right now. And so I love that example. And thank you so much for being able to share about kind of what that process was like for you as far as being able to redirect your thoughts or just continue to redirect your thoughts as far as after the heart attack, being able to stay positive. But one other thing that I really think that people around you value, and I want to most highlight that you said, is the mind body connection that you've been able to show people. And you've gone over so many tips, and I just don't want these to get passed by because I think they're just amazing tools and they're also, again, along the lines of the education. But one of the things you said is that women mainly store energy, or if you have pain, it gets stored in your body, and then women mainly have that stuck in their hips, the energy and that negativity in their hips. So being able to move that out and the
There,
practice.
there's a
Sorry, go ahead.
powerful book by Louise L. Hay. I don't know if
Uh-huh.
you've heard of it. You Can Heal Your
Mhm.
Life. And
Mhm.
she talks about when you're having like things going on within your body,
Mhm.
what is usually the reason for it and what's the positive affirmation you can do with it. And that book, I actually carry a PDF of it on my phone because
Mhm.
I'm constantly like, if I start to get a headache, I'm like, why do I have a headache? Okay, let me go to
Mhm.
my book. And then I read it and I'm like, yep, I was having those negative thoughts. I was thinking this or whatever. And then I start to repeat the positive affirmations and I'll do some stretches and things like that. But that is a book that literally it healed me in ways, especially even after my heart attack. Like I realized how much stress I was putting onto life and finances and things like that. But I am a big believer in that book, but also just understanding the body in whole because our body always talks to us, right? So like I had a lady come in and she was into class and she's like, my husband keeps complaining about his lower back, and I was like, are you having financial problems? And she was like, how did you know? And I was like, well, that's where we carry our finances, is in our lower back. And so it's just one of those things but a book like that can, you know, change you. And it's funny because I go to Barnes and Noble quite frequently with my daughter, and I will literally, before I walk in, I'm like, whatever book I need to know today, let it be there. And most of the time it'll fall off a shelf. Like I walk by and it just falls on the ground. And I'm like, okay, I'm supposed to read that one. Yeah, it happens to me constantly. And my daughter's always like, really? But in the same breath, it's one of those things. It's like I just know if I listen and I pay attention, like I said, and I slow down my breathing, it will be presented to me. Whatever it is I'm needing to know, whatever it is I need to go on my next steps. Um, it's just a matter of me saying yes, right? Or me being present enough to say, okay, this is being shown to me. So how do I do this? How do I get out of my fear and go to the next thing, right? And I think that's been my biggest lesson in this past year is to get out of my comfort zone and to grow past my fear and put myself out there more. But yeah, there's so many books. I share some of them on my social media, but yeah, that one especially is my go-to. I tell people all the time, especially for women, because we don't sometimes have a tendency to speak up as much. I'm finding, especially now that I have a lot of SCAD, because SCAD mostly happens to women, which is the type of heart attack I had, is like 98% women. Yes, there's some men that's happened to, but for the majority, it's women. But a lot of it comes down to um, not speaking up, not using their voice, and just amounts of stress just going on. And a lot of the women I've talked to will even say, I'm like, if you're, be honest with yourself. Like, if that's one thing I can ask of you when we have this conversation, be honest. What was your life like the moment it happened? Were you in a happy place or were you in a stressed and sad place? And most of the time they'll be like, oh, no, no. And then like a couple messages down. Actually, it was not a good time. And I'm like, see,
Mhm.
I'm like, it's just one of those things. I'm like, but it's just our bodies talking to us. And if we pay attention and see the signs, like we can move through this and we can work through it and make it better, or we can be upset with it and it goes the opposite way.
Uh, so my sisters, they're absolutely gonna love this episode. So I'm just like, I would love to sit here and for hours and just hear every story that you have because they're so exciting. But yeah, one sister, she is a manifester,
Yeah.
and obviously you are a very powerful manifester. And then my sister, also other sister, focuses on holistic healing and being able to channel energy through the body. So They are going to be very excited about this energy. But thank you for sharing that and sharing the. I know you mentioned the book, and we're going to put that in the show notes. So thank you so much for sharing that. But being able to hear these stories and examples, it's very exciting and entailing and encouraging that, like, even for myself, just listening, I can now hear and see how this is a possibility for me, and the power of affirmation and
Mhm.
being able to see that connection, where it leads my mind and my body, and how it actually contributes to my life. So I'm very thankful that you shared that, and I'm very excited to go in more into detail, because I think you being able to be that vessel for others and teach others, it's a very vulnerable thing for you to do, but
Mhm.
um you now doing that on social media, you're still being that light for others in order to see, like, that it's possible for them too. And so one thing I want to go a little bit more into detail now, and share whatever you feel comfortable, is the timeline or what the experience was like during the heart attack. I know you mentioned a lot about, having stress, and, how it was actually connected to, well, one thing I want to throw in there is that one of the most valuable tools that I learned in the military is being able to speak up for myself. So the fact that you just touched on that, I'm so thankful, because it was a very difficult tool to learn for myself, because maybe there's not as many examples, and you kind of have this way of thinking as women that you don't really recognize that you're compartmentalizing and keeping inside when you're not speaking up for yourself. So thank you so much for being able to share that. So yeah, now we want to ask a little bit more about what that situation happened during your experience during the heart attack, and sharing whatever you feel comfortable of what happened.
So it was the height of 2020, and we were in the pandemic, and it was a super stressful time. One, so my daughter had, now you have to understand this, my daughter had heart surgery a couple years prior. Ours are completely different. I always tell people, think of hers as electrical, mine was plumbing. So she has something wrong with the electrical part of her heart. So she
Mm,
had surgery. So I knew she had kind of like a pre-existing, so I wasn't really sure what COVID would do. Then I have as my
mm,
son, who, and both kids have food allergies, but my son has severe food allergies and eczema. So I was like, I don't know what this is going to do for him, right? And I know he had a lot of issues when he was born. So he was a NICU baby. He pretty much, well, I'll just put it this way: when I asked the doctor after he was born, is he going to make it? He said, we're taking it hour by hour. He would not give me a straight answer for days. So I now this is, what are we, 6 years, 8 years into this, and I'm like, ugh, this, like, I just have a lot of stress from the two of them with all of their stuffs going on. So now we're in the pandemic. My husband is, let go during the pandemic. Gyms are closed, so I have no way of making money either. And we are at the end of our money, and we are trying to figure out what we're going to do. I'm homeschooling two kids as well, and it was just one of those things that, like, stress just kept piling up one after another. And it was just like, what are we going to do? My husband was delivering groceries. He was doing Instacart at the time. And we were trying to figure out, like, what do we sell the house? Do we, like, I remember having the conversation with him 2 days prior to my heart attack. And we went on a walk, and I was like, okay, I'm going to have to call someone to take our dogs, and we're going to have to sell the house. And luckily, my dad has a second home. So I was like, we could go stay there, but we can't take the dogs there. So we'll have to have someone take them for a while. And just feeling so, like, defeated and deflated, and still training clients out of homes in their, like, garages and whatever, just trying to make some ends meet and just enough to put groceries on the table. And I just knew that night, I kept saying to my husband, I just don't feel good. There's something, I'm tired. He's like, you train clients all morning, like, you're probably tired. And I would help him at night to go deliver groceries. So I would help him go to this so we could do multiple orders at one time. And so we're, going through, and I kept saying to him, I have to go sit down. Like, I'm out of breath. Like, I can't breathe. And he was like, this is not like you. Like, we're in Target. You like being
yeah.
in Target. I'm like, I
Mhm.
know. And I'm like, but I can't. So I had to go sit down. And so we get into the car and we're dropping the order off. And I said to him, I need to go home. Like I don't feel good. I kept feeling like a wave of like nauseousness. And I was like, maybe I'm just car sick. I'm on my phone. I'm just starting the influencer journey. So I'm like trying to promote products and whatever. And I'm like, so
Mhm.
I'm just stressed. And we get home that night, and my husband's like, you know what? I don't think you've eaten in a while. He's like, I'm going to make some dinner. I'm like, okay. And so I said to him, he's going to start making pizza. So he starts making pizza, and all of a sudden, I have a little Maltese poo. She jumps up on my chest, and she's like burying her head in my chest. And I'm like, what are you doing? Like, Stella, get down. And she's just keeps burying her head. And then all of a sudden, within seconds, I just sit up and I grab my chest, and it's an god awful burning pain, but almost like someone was the best example is an elephant standing on your chest, and I felt like this pressure. And so I have my one little multi poo, and then I have my Morkie, and I'm like, if I lay down on the floor, they're just going to attack me, and I can't have them attacking me. So I literally crawled up the stairs and I got to my room, and I just collapsed onto the floor. I kept trying to crawl around. The pain just kept getting worse. It was between my chest and my shoulders. And my daughter came in the room and she was like, are you okay? And I was like, no, like, I'm gonna be okay. I'm gonna be okay. But no, I'm not okay. And she was like, okay, what should I do? And I was like, nothing. I'm fine. I just gotta stretch. I just gotta move. It'll get better. It'll pass. And so as the minutes passed, then I start just really, not to be gross, but vomiting all over my bedroom floor. And I'm like, okay, this is not right. Like there's something
Mhm.
wrong. So she calls my husband. So he finally comes upstairs and he's Googling and he's like, you're having a heart attack. I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm 38. Like, I'm a fitness trainer. I'm in great shape. And he's like, are you sweating? I'm like, yes. He's like, you're vomiting, your blood pressure, your pulse, like all. And I'm like, no, I'm fine. Like, everything is fine. So I refused to call an ambulance. I told him, no, I'm fine. It's going to pass. I just need to stretch. Like, I need to pop my chest or something. He's like, well, we lifted heavy yesterday. So maybe that's it. And I'm like, maybe. Well, then within minutes, I was like, no, there's something wrong. Like, I probably should go to the hospital. So finally, he convinces me to get in the car. Well, then once I get in the car, we get down the road and I literally coded. And so then my husband's screaming and shaking me and whatever. And I had a life altering experience at that moment. I can say that I definitely saw the other side. I remember it being all black and then seeing a very white light, and then I kept hearing my husband like in the background screaming at me. And I lost my best friend a few years ago to brain cancer, and I saw him coming towards me, and I was like, I'm not ready. And so I said to him, I'm not ready. I have two kids to take care of. And he said, okay. And so I came back and I literally did the whole like, and I looked up and I said to my husband, I was like, I'm having a heart attack. And he's like, I know. And he's like, you just went dark on me. And I was like, yeah. And so we live about a mile from a fire department. So he pulls in. And here's the hard part, right? I am in the middle of a heart attack. We pull into the fire department. And the weird part about my kind of heart attack is it doesn't always show on an EKG because
Mhm.
it's inside. So what's happened is it's called spontaneous coronary artery dissection. So an artery in my heart has torn and caused a blockage. So the blood flow is no longer going through here. It's a flap down now like this. So it's trying to go over and over the two types of over the vessel and it can't
Mhm.
get through. So it's blocking. So it's starting to close it. So it won't show up on an EKG always. And the only way to truly try to figure this out is if they go in and do an angiogram or blood work. And
Mhm.
so of course, I'm at the fire department, and they're like, "You're just having an anxiety attack." And I was like, "I promise
What?
you, this is not an anxiety attack. I know what just happened to me, and I know how I'm feeling." And so the one guy was like, "Listen, if I were you, you can either go home or you can take a fancy car ride." And I was like, at this point, I know what just happened. And if I don't get help right now, this fancy car ride's going to turn into a hearse. So like, I need to go. So we get to the hospital and the same thing again. You're having an anxiety attack. And luckily, the cardiologist on call said, let's do the 3 hour test. We're going to do a one test they do the blood work when you first come in, and we're going to do the 3-hour test before we let you go. And so, because they're like, everything looks fine, but they didn't do like ultrasounds or anything like that. They only did the EKG. So at the 3-hour mark, they come back in, and my room is flooded with everyone because they all kept telling me I was having anxiety and I was going home. They told me to put my shoes on and get ready. But there was one last blood test. And I was like, okay. And they're like, so we're going to do that one, but then we're going to send you home. And I was like, okay. So my husband comes back because he went home to go check on the kids, came back, and he was like, what's going on? And I'm hooked up to all these machines. They're yelling, screaming, everything. And the one doctor looks at me and goes, you're surprised. And I was like, so what does that mean? Does that mean I had a heart attack like I thought I did? He is like, then he leaves the room and the nurse goes, you had a heart attack. And I was like, I knew it. None of you listened to me. I knew what I was talking about, which is sad because this is what happens a lot, and which is
Yeah.
why there's only a 20% survival rate of SCAD because it
Wow.
doesn't always show on an EKG, and most of them get sent home and told they're having anxiety. Which is another reason why I share about what's the true symptoms of anxiety versus SCAD.
Mm.
It's actually one of my most viral videos on TikTok is my 7 signs of a heart attack. And it's because I think so many people just don't realize that it can happen at any age, but also that these are the signs. You're not really
Mhm.
necessarily having an anxiety attack. If it goes away within seconds or a couple of minutes, then yeah. But if it's not and it's staying pretty progressive, you're definitely having a heart attack. So from there, I was admitted and went through the whole process. The hardest part is it's such a rare type of heart attack that there's not a lot of research out there. And so a lot of cardiologists don't know how to help you or what to do. So they just kind of tell you to stay away from everything. And so I was seeing a cardiologist, and he literally gave me 9 medications and said, go about your life. Just probably only walk. Like that's all you should do. You should never work out again. And I was like, that's not happening because movement is medicine to me. I love working out. There's no way, it's the Drake song with Kim Kardashian. I didn't come this far to just not be happy. So for me, like I came this far, there's no way I'm just going to have this acceptance. So luckily my dad was a pretty big uh, prominent part of my life, and he was like, I'm taking you to the Mayo Clinic and we're going to go see what we can do. And luckily I called, and I swear it's divine intervention. As I'm telling the nurse of what's happened, she was like, okay, I have this doctor, and typing it all in. Then she's like, wait, hold on, what did you just say again? And so I repeated my story, and she's like, can you be here at 8 a.m. tomorrow? I have a doctor that I think would be good for you. And so I got there, and it was pretty amazing. The woman I wound up seeing not only was a great cardiologist, but she had studied under for her residency the leading researchers of SCAD. So
Oh
she
my
knew
gosh.
everything about SCAD, how to help me, what to do. Um, the only thing her and I bicker about is if I can do endurance training or not, but she's fine with me working out. She loves that I'm bringing awareness to this. She loves that I managed to heal my body because, too, I didn't get to do like cardiac rehab and things like that because that was only for patients who had heart transplants because we were in COVID and they were afraid of people coming in and having COVID and whatever. So I had to heal myself and I had to learn myself, which in hindsight, right, is it coincidence that I have 18 certifications, or was it the overall understanding that throughout my journey I was going to have this heart attack and have to heal myself and teach myself how to get better and be able to do it? So, um, yeah, so it was a really challenging time, but luckily my husband got a job soon after my heart attack, and I finally started to heal. It took me about a year of fully healing, and because the hard part is there's no surgeries or nothing they can do. I tell everybody, think about like a pulled sweater, right? And if you have a pull on a sweater, if you keep pulling it, it'll just keep disintegrating and the sweater comes apart. That's what happened with your artery. So they can't put a stent in, they can't do anything. It has to just heal on its own. And so that took about a year of that. But a lot of my recovery, where I know that this has been a huge part, is my mental, because you have the doctors who say you can't lift above 20 pounds. So I'm like, oh, I just lifted a 20-pound weight. Am I going to give myself another heart attack? Or if I run too fast, am I going to give myself another heart attack? Or am I stressing my body too much? Am I going to give myself another heart attack? Like there's this constant little gremlin back here. I like to call her Gertie. And she's constantly talking to me and telling me like, hey, you're really not supposed to do that. Remember, you could do this again. This could
Mhm.
happen. And I have to tell Gertie, listen, I love you, but you need to be quiet because I know I can do this. I know I can heal
Yeah.
myself. I know I can get stronger. And I think that's my biggest thing with teaching women now because they come to me. I have at least one or two, oh, if not three a week that are new to SCAD, and they're like, my doctor says I can't work out. What do I
Mhm.
do? I see you working out, and I'm like, yes, we can. I promise you, we can. New research is showing we can. They just don't understand what has happened, why it's happened, so they kind of err on the side of caution. But in the same breath, like I think the hardest thing for us SCAD people is getting over the mental because that is the
Yeah.
scariest part because we feel like our body failed us, right? We're in our prime 30s, 40s, whatever. We're feeling great, we're taking care of ourselves
Mhm.
and this happens. So it's like how do we get past that? And I do a lot of mental coaching with these women to make them understand like we have to understand where we were in our journey versus where we're going in our journey because where we were wasn't serving us, which is why we had the heart attack and it came on. And now we can heal and go further. So it's kind of what's happened over the past 3 years. And so this October will be my 3 year anniversary from my SCAD, and I'm stronger now. I lift heavier now. I run more, faster, everything that I did pre heart attack, which is amazing because it's like it took me having a heart attack to lift, deadlift 150 pounds. Like, really? Like, it took me this long? Like, but in the same breath, it's perspective, right? Like, in this, I can look at it and be like, oh, it took that. Or I can look at it and go, it took that to make me realize, like, hey, you are capable, you are
Mhm.
strong, Like, I did an Instagram story the other day and I was telling my followers, I watched this whole documentary and read this whole thing about running. And they said that runners don't go out and go, it's hard. It's hard. It's hard. It's hard, right? When they're running, they're like, this is easy. This is effortless. I can do this, which is why they start to get a runner's high. So the other
Yeah.
day, I did my Peloton class and I'm like, this sucks. And then like, no, change your thinking. So I'm literally in my garage yelling, it's easy, effortless, powerful, strong, easy. And so my husband like goes outside, he like looks back, like, what is she doing? But my run was the best run I've ever had. And I was
Mhm.
like, oh my gosh, like that was amazing. But it was changing my thinking and telling
Yeah.
myself like I can do this. So yeah.
Oh my goodness. I don't even know where to begin.
I know
Oh
so
my
much. I dumped it all out there.
god. This is such an incredible and uplifting story, and thank you so much for being vulnerable in order to share it and go into depth of what that experience was like for you. And I'm so thankful that you're here today to share your story and, to be there for your family and for yourself in order to support this cause of this awareness. And wow. So yeah, my dad also recently had a heart attack. I think it was like 6 months ago. And what you were saying is, I guess like maybe denial of like, oh no, I'm fine, I'm okay. And like I wasn't there, but his girlfriend was, and she was also saying, okay, well, like well, he was saying, okay, something doesn't feel right, which is like, okay, I mean, something always doesn't feel right, if you can look at it that way. But yeah, how you explain of the being aware of what was going on, but then it got a little bit more intense, and that was kind of the same thing that happened with him. It was well, my dad's girlfriend took it more seriously and then they went to the hospital, but I can understand how that perspective of, this isn't true, this should be something else, and especially like taking the statistics and putting that into your mind, kind of just knowing what's going on because it's hard to tell. Nobody's there to just
Yeah.
say this is that. So I am just blown away that everybody thought it was an anxiety attack.
I
And
I had three doctors in the room with me and all the nurses, and they're all like, you're just anxiety. I'm like, promise, this is not anxiety attack. I've had anxiety attacks. This is nothing compared to that. Like it's a
yeah.
completely different feeling of the a pain, right? Like when we're having an anxiety attack, it's the you feel tight, like
Yeah.
you can't really breathe, but this is like someone was actually stepping on me, and
Hmm.
that's what I was trying to explain to them. Like I know anxiety and I know this. This is different.
Hmm.
This isn't like a um that tightness and feel like I can't breathe and kind of like the tingles. No, this was like my arm was like you could punch my arm and I couldn't feel it. And I felt
Mhm.
like something was super heavy on my chest and there was a burning and there was like a lot of gas and vomiting and, just a sweating. I was like, even an anxiety attack, I don't sweat like this. Like I
Mhm.
would, I can feel the tension. I can feel myself get warm, but not like this. This was like I just did a hit training class and I am just pouring with sweat. So
Mhm.
completely different. But it's hard because we do go into denial, right? It's easy to because it's like, no, that's not me. And no one in my family's had this, or even just I'm young, I'm healthy, I have all these things. There's just no possible way. But it happens because I let stress get to me. That was my biggest thing. That's my biggest cause. But I think for a lot of people, it's just understanding, it can be a mixture of things, of course, diet, family history, things like that. But knowing those telltale signs um, can really it can change your life in a matter of seconds because you'll either take action or if you don't. And if you don't take action, then that's what happens.
Yeah, and I'm just so thankful that you're able to be an advocate for this community and for this cause for anybody, especially women that's a lot of women joining your community like 2 or 3 a week, like, and that's such valuable input as far as being able to help them reflect on, where they were, after the heart attack or maybe before, because the before is what you're saying is the most important because it's identifying what stress was actually doing to your body. And now you are able to, it's just like, they just remind me of the question, how do you stay so positive? Okay, now I understand. Like, I get a really, really good full circle picture because like it's so important of the way you talk to yourself. And we had one of our guests on the show said, if you don't talk to yourself, you're crazy. And I completely agree. And even what you said with the example of running, like I was running this morning and yeah, like how we were saying, but I uh, don't run as often right now just because I'm doing different type of training. But me being able to ideally go for 1 mile, but ended up going for two. But the example you just gave, like I actually was saying to myself in my head, I'm like, okay, wait, this is easier. I am enjoying this. And then now listeners who don't work out or do work out can agree or attest to the way you talk to yourself as far as like how you're feeling about your body and what's doing it or what's making it feel good and checking in with
Yeah.
yourself
I mean, I think
can
the biggest thing is like noticing, even in a workout, right? Like I tell people
mhm,
this all the time. I get to. You don't
yeah,
have to work out. You get to work out. If you
yeah,
change that, that could change your whole workout.
mhm,
Or, like my husband and I, we've done a lot of work over the years with wounded veterans.
mhm,
And I think of them every time
yeah,
I'd work out because I've met a lot like who've lost arms and legs and still go
mhm,
to the gym. And I'm like,
yeah,
you have one arm and yet you still go
mhm,
to the gym and you still work out. Like
yeah,
what he wouldn't give to have my legs. Like,
mhm,
why don't I take that as a privilege and say, Ness, go run? Like, you have the ability, you get to do this, you
yeah,
can do this. So it's just changing that. And that's one of the things I say all the time when people come into my Pilates classes, like they come in, they'll be like, hi. I'm like, hi, you're not gonna like me, but here we go. And then I instantly you showed up today for a reason and you get
uh-huh,
to be here. So make it work. Instead of sitting there complaining and being like, oh, your classes are so hard, how about you just say, like, hey, I got to be here with her. I showed
mhm,
up, I gave myself this time, and I got to move my body. And when you
mhm,
change that thinking, the whole workout becomes like people leave crying half the time. And they're like, why am
yeah,
I crying? And I'm like, because you changed your perspective and you
yeah,
felt good about it and you had an attitude of gratitude. And when you have that, you can't help but be excited for what's happening and you're grateful.
yeah, I completely agree. And it's when you complete a challenging workout too, or even do more what you were expecting or what your goal was set out to do, it's such a extreme level of confidence boost, but you don't even know how to explain it. You like
Yeah.
literally have to do it for yourself. So that's amazing that you are able to show that to people as well and continue to do it for yourself as well. So I love that. I love that example. And before we get to our last question here, I wanted to give you a chance to maybe go a little bit more into detail for our listeners that do have SCAD or in that community. If what are the symptoms, or what's ways that they can check in with their body as far as if they do want to get back into a momentum of handling stress or working out or anything along those lines?
So, of course, I always tell everybody, yes, listen to your doctor, especially if you have a different
Mhm.
type of, something that happened during your SCAD, or maybe you had multiple arteries tear versus just one, things like that. But then from there, I tell everyone, start working on your mental, right? The mental is one of the biggest things. You can always look at the Mayo Clinic. The Mayo Clinic puts out a lot of information. They are the leading researchers in SCAD. They put out a lot of information about working out, things like that. I even have it on my blog. One of their newest ones that they did, I think it was like a year ago, about like that we should work out. There is no heart rate range that we should be staying
Wow.
within, things like that, because that's some of the things that people are misled about. And even lifting with the 20 pounds above your head or anything. I mean, I press 30-pound dumbbells now. So, but that took a lot of mental strength, because every time I got to 20, I would tell myself, you're going to give yourself another heart attack, right? So
Mhm.
it was a hard thing for me to overcome mentally, but then once I have, it's been amazing. But so Mayo Clinic puts out a lot of great information. And then I tell people, start working on your breathing, start working on your mental. How do you talk to yourself, right? How do you show up for yourself every day? Because if you could do just 5 minutes every day of like how you're noticing, you're reflecting of how you're talking to yourself, that will change. And then you'll start to do 5 minutes throughout the day several different times. And then you'll start to feel better, because you're realizing like, hey, Gertie's back there. She's just talking away, when
Mhm.
you can be like, listen, like, yes, I had a heart attack, but I'm okay. I'm here. I get to move again. I get to do this.
Yeah.
And then from there, walking. And I actually did I don't know if it was TikTok or Instagram the other day. And I said, the one thing I wish I would have added in sooner was power walking.
Mm.
Because I felt like that kind of gave me the ability to start to build up some endurance, but also start to build up some strength as well within my heart, but also within my body and my legs. Because one of the hardest things I noticed, and I've talked to several women now over this, I mean, more than several, probably almost 100. Um, we lose all of our strength. So the first six
Mhm.
months or so, because your body's trying to heal, I feel like it's sending everything to the heart to heal it. So I literally, I
Um,
mean, I was in amazing shape when this happened. And then I lost all my strength. I gained 20 pounds, and I was like, wait, not only did I have the mental side of the heart attack, but then I had the
yeah.
physical attributes of what happened. So that took a lot of mental to get over as well, to be like, hey, like, you're not a number on the scale. You're not a number on the pair of pants. It doesn't equal your, what your value of what you bring to the table. And realize that this happened for a reason, and you can get this weight off again, or you may never go back to that size, but that's okay, because that's not who you are. Just because the
Yeah.
pant says a size 4 doesn't mean you are this amazing person. So it took some of those things, but then from there, I tell people, start doing body weight. Body weight, you'd be surprised. Calisthenics can do a lot for the body. Um, but it also kind of gives you that like movement. You have to move with your breath, right? I always tell people that's the cool part about yoga and Pilates is one movement, one breath.
Yeah.
As we do an exercise, we're exhaling, and as we're moving through the exercise, we're inhaling, right? And so when you start to have that connection, then you realize, oh, my breathing is eradicated, which most people will start to realize. And especially I find after SCAD too, is that we should breathe shallow. We breathe into the collarbones here. So it's a lot of like quick, short breaths. And so the
Mm.
more that you can do slower movements and just kind of working through, so like if you're doing squats and you're working through the inhale on the down and the exhale on the up, you'll notice you'll start to get down deeper, and you'll start to get into your belly breathing. And then you won't have the mind going, hey, if you do this, you're going to have a heart attack, or hey, like this is really
Mm.
hard. You can slow your breathing down while you're doing the exercise, and which is actually better anyways, because more time under tension builds the muscle faster.
Yeah.
Um, so as you're doing that and you're moving slow through it, your breathing will be helpful, because it'll slow the mind, it'll slow the chatter, but it
Mhm.
also just helps you be aware, and then you're connected.
Yeah.
So I tell people, of course, breathing, meditation is always going to be good. Then get into walking, power walking, and then start to get into calisthenics. And then once you're into calisthenics and you feel like, I can do 4 sets of 10 of every exercise, then start to add in the weights. And then from there, You can just go with it, rock it. Like then I started doing hit trainings, whatever, like whatever you love to do, you can do again. I've not found there isn't anything now that I can't do that I didn't do beforehand. The only thing my doctor, she is weary about is if I went to do endurance training, like if I wanted to go run a marathon or do an Ironman, she's like,
Mhm.
I don't know, that's a lot of stress on the body and on the heart. I probably wouldn't recommend it. It's never been my thing anyway, so I'm like, that's okay. I don't want to really do an Ironman. I mean, I've
Mhm.
trained people for them, but I don't really want to do them, so
Mhm.
I'm okay with that. But in the same breath, I was like, I've never been a runner, but I want to be a runner. And so after my heart attack, my husband bought me a Peloton treadmill, and I've been running since then. And I've taught myself like all the tips and tricks and how to run, and because I always did yoga, Pilates, and spin, like those were my
Mhm.
like in weightlifting, but
Mhm.
now I do like heavy weightlifting and I run. And I'm like, who is this girl? But it's more so like because they told me I couldn't, I was like, yes, I can. Like, watch me. Like,
Yeah.
I just one of those, like, when you tell me you can, I'm like, yes, I can. I'm gonna prove you wrong. But it's just one of those things too. I wanted to push myself and teach myself to move past my fear, right? Because there's the whole face everything and rise or face everything and run.
Mhm.
Um, and I wanted to rise. I wanted to thrive. I didn't want to just be a heart attack survivor. I wanted to be a thriver. And
Yeah.
so I think that's been my biggest thing the past couple of years is like, how much can I do more to make myself better? Because I know I can be
Mhm.
better.
Yeah, and let me tell you, you are.
Oh,
You are
thank you.
absolutely thriving, and I'm so excited to just hear everything that you're working on and the variety of workouts that you have incorporated, before and after your heart attack and just throughout your physical health journey as well. And this is so powerful for even for people that who haven't had the same experience but want to start their mental health journey and physical health journey. These are such powerful tools that are so helpful when it comes to overcoming that thought in your mind. And again, going back to the education, so the Mayo Clinic, I didn't touch on this earlier, but that again, that divine timing of how you connected with your doctor. I'm so like blown away that that happened, and then now you're able to do that connection and be part of the. Correct me if I'm wrong, but be part of the research that goes into this type of heart attack and
Yeah, so I'm
for
actually a part of the research group.
yes,
So they study my body.
yes,
So they have all of my testing, my scores, everything. I had to go through a whole trial process. They actually, I
hmm
think that the education part is full. Like you can't submit any more new patients or anything like
okay,
that. But for me, I was one of the last ones to get in. So they actually study all of my results, my scores, everything. And then when I go in for my checkups, they get all that information about
hmm
what my workouts are, what I'm doing. So they study me and I'm part of so when you go into, like they have um, whatever it's called. I forget the name of it now. I'm drawing a blank, but the findings of what they found over the past, they studied hundreds of women, these women at these ages, blah, blah. I'm in that research group. So,
wow,
yeah. And I'm actually doing a testing with the Mayo Clinic as well for EKGs for the Apple Watch to see if we
hmm
can say that these are truly accurate and that they can show changes within our bodies so that if you were in the middle of a heart attack, you could go to your cardiologist and say, my EKG is showing this. And then they would say, this is accurate. We'll go send you to the hospital, whatever. Or just to have um, a reference point so that you don't have to go in to get an EKG. You could use just your Apple Watch. So I do that testing as well.
wow. That's incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we're gonna link the Mayo Clinic information in the bio also. That's something I also learned about in class when it comes to learning about your body and your mind and what you put into your body is knowing credible resources in order to help yourself properly educate studies, information on, again, with your body or what you put into your body as far as food or anything. So thank you so much for sharing that and making it comprehensible for anybody who doesn't understand that those studies are out there where they can find them or anything along those lines. And one thing I want to touch on before we get to our last question is that I love your example of when you said about doing the squats, so you mentioned about focusing on your breathing while you were doing the movement slower, whether if that's with weights or not, but that's actually pointing out a skill of coping mechanism, skill of being present, which again, working out for me, I found, especially with running, helped me, without even realizing it, helped me be present and only focus on one foot going after the other. So you being able to show an example of how to take that even further with focusing on your breath while you do that, while moving your body and then connecting it to your thoughts. I love that, and I think that's so, it's going to be so beneficial for our listeners to be able to see that through and have the ability to try it themselves in a way that works for them. So, our last question here, if somebody were to start their mental health journey, what kind of what kind of advice or information would you tell them in order to start their mental health journey?
I think the biggest thing with their mental health journey is definitely self-reflection. I think that is powerful. It's something I talk to my son about a lot, and can help you realize when you're in your struggle or you're on your struggle bus, like, why am I on my struggle bus? I think that's one of the biggest things that I have. A lot of my girlfriends, I had asked a question to them the other day, and I said to them, "What's the one thing that you come to me for, you would pay me for, whatever?" And they're like, "You always give me reflection, like
Mhm.
helping me understand in a situation, like what's really going on." And I said, "Well, I think the biggest thing for me is I'm constantly doing that to myself. I think." Yes, you could stumble upon it like I did, right, when I was 16 with my mom. You could go to a therapist, and I think a lot of therapy is great and can give you some tips and tricks and tools and books to read and things like that. But I think the biggest thing you have to have in order to move forward, to heal, and to um, start to work on your mental health, it's having that self-reflection. Like, because a lot of times, like even the other day, my girlfriend was telling me this story about her and her husband, and I said, "But you're not mad at him. Like, be honest with yourself. You're upset about the situation. You're upset about what you couldn't control, and you're upset about the reflection of that it had on you, but it had
Yeah.
nothing to do with him." And she
Mhm.
was like, "Yes." And I'm like, "I know." I'm like, "It's the hardest part." I'm like, "But when we're honest with ourselves," I'm like, because I can tell you there's a million times, like the other day I was upset and because I was doing something for a brand and my Google Drive wasn't working and my husband's trying to help me and I'm snapping at him. And then finally I looked at him and I'm like, I I'm sorry. This has nothing to do with you. Like I snapped at you because you're the one right here, but I'm really just upset at myself because I waited till the last minute to submit this. I should have
Mhm.
done this earlier. And in the same breath, I need to reach out to them and tell them like I'm having an issue here and I don't need you to fix it." And he was like, "You don't want me to work on this?" And I'm like, "No." And I shut the computer and I was like, let's just, I took a moment, I just breathed. And then I looked at him and I'm like, because it had nothing to do with you. It was more about myself.
Mhm.
But that takes years and that takes time. And I know that for people. And that's why I talk to my son about it constantly. Um, but I find that I think if you're starting on your mental health journey and you're like, I don't know where to begin, I think going for a walk and asking yourself some simple questions like, why do I feel the way I feel? Why am I in this position? Why do I have sad thoughts today? And just while you're
Mhm.
walking, and I think you'll be surprised how quickly they get answered in your own head. But I think that
Yeah.
that movement, because we're distracting ourselves, right? Which is a lot of times why I think over the years my personal training business was so successful and
Mhm.
so um, greater than my classes was because I would do that. I would have triggering questions. I'd ask people in the middle of a workout, but it would make them have to break it down and realize, like, because I would see people cheat and I'd be like, why do you feel like you can't lift that weight the full way?
Mhm.
Why do you feel like you can't squat down the full way? And they'd be like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, because you keep doing it. Like, you keep not squatting. So I'm just curious why. Is it because it's hard? Is it because you're going through something in your head? Is it and then next thing you know, it'd be like verbal diarrhea and all these things are coming out. And they'd be like,
Mhm.
I feel amazing. And I'm like, yes, because we worked through whatever it was that was limiting you from being able, but it took you moving and asking the question. Because if I sometimes if I just sit there and ask the
Yeah.
question, it's not going to work. It's kind of like, so Louise L. Hay, she has another book, it's called Mirror Work. And in her mirror work book, she talks about sitting down and looking at yourself in a mirror. And she's like, and that's one of the hardest things people really struggle with the most because they don't want
Yeah.
to look at themselves. But you have to sit down and look at yourself and ask yourself some questions. And in that, you can be so, it can be uplifting because it can help you work through things. But that took me a long time to sit down in front of a mirror. So what I realized for me, what helped me always is I walk and I ask myself questions. Why do I feel this way? What's really bugging me? Why am I aggravated? And then I go through those steps and then I will start to feel better. I can start to answer some questions. I think there's I don't know where I saw it. So I saw it somewhere, but it was the whole thing about why. If you ask yourself why, right?
Yeah.
And what happens, what is it, WHY? So who hurt you, right? You can ask yourself that question, but then ask yourself who healed you. And then you can ask yourself who helped you, right? So when you change the way you ask why, it can be completely
Mm.
different. And so I do that a lot. Like when I go through, because even right now I'm going through some pretty heavy stuff. I just lost my older sister, and one of my girlfriends was like, "Are you going to go to therapy?" And I was like, "Yes and no." I said, "At this moment in my life right now, I'm in a good place." And I'm like, "But I know I have some hard days, right? And I know I'm going through some issues and trying to heal through it, but I do. I literally walk a lot right now. I get at least 12,000 steps a day. But I ask myself those questions. Why? Like, why is this hurting me? Like, why?
Mhm.
But then the next breath, I'm like, but how's it going to help me? Is it going to help me
Yeah.
by being sad? And
Mhm.
then how's it going to heal me? It's going to heal me because I'm going to realize she's in a better place and she's where she's supposed to be. And she did her time here and she helped who she was supposed to help. And now she's moved on. Right. And so it's like one of those things, like, I just know, I think in my own personal journey, in what I've done over the 17 years of being a fitness trainer, movement with asking yourself simple questions can be life altering. One of my
Mhm.
clients, she had a terrible type of cancer. And one day she came to me and we were working out and she was like telling me, I got to go in for new scans. I got to do all this. And so I finally just looked at her and it was probably the most unprofessional way I've ever done this. But I just looked at her and I was like, what's the worst that could happen? And she was like, and then she just looked at me and then she smiled and she goes, the worst that's going to happen is I have cancer. And I said, exactly. I said, so at that point, you already know the worst case scenario and you've already been through it. You know what to expect. And she's like, you know what? That was life altering. And so ever since then, every time I saw her, all she ever would say to me is, what's the worst that could happen? And I'm like, see, I'm
Aw.
like, because I think when you change the perspective on it, you just realize if you go to worst case scenario, you just know the end result. So you're like, okay, I can heal through this, I can move through it. But I would say, coming full circle to your question, go on a walk and ask yourself some questions. And if on that walk you can't answer those questions, maybe it's time to go seek a therapist. And
Mhm.
then at that point, go through therapy and try different types of therapy. Not all therapy is created equal.
Yeah.
And I think that there's different ones that can help because there's yoga therapy, there's art therapy, there's movement therapy, there's EMDR. My nephew's doing a new one that's like, he says it's like EMDR on crack. And he's like, but it's amazing. He's like, but it's been really helpful, right? Since my sister's passing, he's like, it's helped me a ton. So I just think that there's so many different types that you can do, and know that if you just keep trying to put one foot in front of the other and try to be 1% better every day, it will happen and you will feel good and you'll find what's right for you on your path and your journey. But don't quit just because one person said this, right? Like I could have quit years ago. Now knowing my story, I could have quit years ago when I was 18 years old because I had the one bad therapist, but I kept saying to
Yeah.
myself, she's one bad apple. But there could be
Yeah.
1,000 good apples out there. I just don't know. And I know I don't like the way I feel, and I know I want to be better. And I just know, like, if I just keep trying and I keep putting tools in my toolbox, one day I'll have enough tools so that when things happen, I won't have to go searching for the tools. They'll just be there and I can help others move through it. Because my
Yeah.
goal has always, I've always said this, even when I used to teach yoga all the time, I used to have, sayings I would say at the end of class. And I always used to say, one day your story will be someone else's survival guide. And
Mhm.
so if my story can be someone else's survival guide to help them through and help them get to a better place, then I did my job and I did my journey, what I was supposed to do here.
Mhm.
But I just feel like telling people my story and telling people not to give up on themselves is the biggest thing with your mental health, because a lot of people will. They will give up. They will say this is it. This is all, you know. And that's not the truth. That's not your story. Your story can change. It can change at any day, any time.
Yeah. And thank you so much for being an uplifting light as far as sharing your story and being vulnerable of the situations that happened in your life, and sharing the tools that you were saying that you use in order to being able to view your life in a more positive way as far as worst case scenario. And personally, I want to say I'm sorry for the loss of your sister,
Thank
and
you.
that I can relate to having lost a lot of family members, and the grief experience being difficult and different for every person that I've lost. So you being able to put that in perspective as far as identifying your feelings and your emotions that come up with that, because I do believe that the grief is different for every situation, but like you said, being able to kind of ask yourself and find a way to properly get the best feedback after asking you those questions of self-reflection and self-awareness, as far as identifying those feelings and pushing back through that. I appreciate how you vocalize that and we're able to share that with our audience. And another thing I want to say is that I think you are the ideal friend to have. Maybe, I mean, I was like, maybe some people are like that don't want to do the work can probably, give a little face of knowing that they're probably gonna say you're gonna probably gonna say some things that are uncomfortable, and it's gonna force them to do the work. But I mean, I think you're the kind of friend that everybody needs, because you're gonna be that uplifting light, like I said, and help them see through what they're doing, because especially like the example you gave with the workout, and having not only pushing yourself that bit further, but having doing the same for others, and being open about the communication, as far as using communication of your reflection on what you're feeling and how you're treating others, and then explaining it to people. Because another thing I think is a valuable tool is not only doing the identification of what's going on with you, but being able to vocalize it to somebody around you that may be affected by your mood, if it isn't a good one. Because a lot of times we assume, okay, what's up with this person, and then they don't say it. So
Ah,
thank you for sharing that tool, and I think it's one of the most powerful that I've personally learned, and everything that you've said throughout the day has been um, so valuable, and I'm so thankful that you were able to be on the show today. So, for anybody who wants to get in contact with you and connect, what is the best way we can reach you?
all of my social channels are Vanessa Cutting. So Instagram, TikTok, Pinterest, even my blog is vanessacutting.com. So any of those you can reach out to me on.
Okay, sounds wonderful. And again, thank you so much for being on the show and sharing your story. I appreciate your vulnerability, and you're such a miracle as far as what you've overcome, and how you continue to overcome and push through that fear, but and also just be that light for others. So thank you so much for your time and committing to this to our community. So we're gonna go ahead and wrap it up, everybody, and have a great day. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.